Govern- Now I think we're recording. Hello, everybody out there, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Atlassian Governance Practices. We're particularly excited about this webinar because it's so fundamental to how we do business. I'm Jason Buettner, Head of Practice for Enterprise Strategy and Planning for Valiantys. That's a mouthful. Before I say anything else, I just want to hand off to Bonnie Byer to introduce herself and kick this thing off.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Byer, and I haven't updated my role. I'm actually an engagement director, Atlassian certified, and safe SPC.
Good stuff. All right, let's go. Don't want to credentialize a whole lot here, but some of you who are joining might not know exactly who we are and what we do. So we are the top #1 Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner globally. We are in 27 countries across the world, and you can see all the credentials down there at the bottom. That isn't to impress you guys, but it is to impress upon you that we've been in this ecosystem for a while. We do all things Atlassian. We do help companies with problems, though, that go beyond Atlassian tools, and that involves any technology initiative. Any success that we have with our customers is driven #1 by us being able to provide value, and that value's not just at the tool level, it's people, process, and technology. Many of you have heard that three-legged stool analogy, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later on. But it's a big part of who we are. We provide value at all those levels. And so that's why we're talking about governance today. And it's not just tool governance. We're going to talk about a lot of things. And it's people, process, and technology. So
Well,
back to you.
governance, this webinar, here's an agenda of what we're going to talk about. I typically go to the who, what, why, where, when type questions of my agenda. So what we're going to start out with is, what is governance? What does it really mean? Why do we care about it? Why do we care about governance when it comes to our Atlassian tools? Who is involved? And how do we get started? How do we actually get started doing this governance thing in our own environment? And then I'm going to give you a demo of some of the assets that we use in our governance engagements, and then we'll wrap it up with some questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll answer those when we get at the end. So what is governance? Well, Wikipedia defines it as the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or society. It's important to understand that governance as a word by itself is not enough information for anything. Governance needs a qualifier. Are we talking about governing our Atlassian tools? Are we talking about governing our processes? Are we talking about governing a country or a school or a company? So what we are going to focus in on quite a bit is our Atlassian tools governance practices, but we also talk frequently with our clients about process governance or other types of governance. And really, IT companies are very familiar with governance. So there's lots of governance throughout your organization. IT manages all of the enterprise tools and your equipment and your servers. And so they have historically had really good governance. Large engineering programs will have scope control with a change control board or their lean, agile body that is managing that, governing the scope on their programs. Your hardware and software development practices, all of these different things are examples of how you are governing the software and the products that you are developing for your customers. But when it comes to governance, you need to consider that three-legged stool that Jason mentioned, the people, processes, and tools. And so for governance itself, you want to make sure that you have a very representative governance, and that it represents all of the people that are impacted and how they use those tools. So that way you're getting, you understand their requirements and you understand their needs. If governance is only by the people that are managing the tools, they are not getting good representation from all of the end users. And that governance board does have to have the proper roles and responsibilities and the authority to make those decisions. The tools of governance, there are several tools that can be involved and should be involved. We often use Confluence for our knowledge base and for all of our administration and decision-making documentation. But you also may be using a Jira system, or you might use SharePoint or some of the other tools. And so you'll want to consider that in your governance implementation, is what tools are we using for our governance itself. And then you have your practices. And so there are your recommended practices as well as those that are required. And you have best practices and you have design decisions, which are weighing in all of those best practices or alternative solutions. All of these things are going to go into that decision making for that governance board. We talk often about what are the best practices for that governance, and I list them there. Of course, you want that representative decision making. That governance board also needs to apply holistic systems thinking in their decision making, considering all of the different aspects of that changes. Also, it's really, this is my favorite part, people drive processes and processes drive tools. If the tools are driving the process, then you've got things backwards. And so always keep that framework in mind when you're making the decisions. And you want to have intentional change management. So that way you're communicating and effectively helping all of the people that are going to be using those tools, enabling them to be able to use them appropriately. So using that intentional change management, ADKAR is a great model, awareness, desire, knowledge, ADKAR, ability, and reinforcement. So that's a great model for change management.
Good job on that recall. That's a tough one. I was like, is she going to pull that out? Wow. All right.
I can even name all 7 dwarfs.
Sweet.
So, but why do we care about governance? Well, honestly, it boils down to if you've got a wild west situation in your Jira system, you have garbage in, garbage out when it comes to your automated reports. When you have your integrations, you're going to have quality issues. You want to follow the best practices for your architecture of your system and your governance guidelines. So that way you can track that full life cycle of your development work, from intake all the way to delivery and support. You also want to be able to improve that visibility to all of the executives and all of the stakeholders so that they can understand exactly what scope is in play, what the schedule is, and what they can expect, and all of the dependencies and blockers and risks associated with that, all of those great project management activities. You also want to improve that operational visibility and collaboration by providing that guidance and the standards, explaining to everybody what is required, what is not required, what is optional, what is best practice, and why we made the decisions for these things. So that way there's full transparency there.
You care if I hop in for a second on a thought
Yeah.
conversation? I just was with a customer the other day and had a conversation, and he was describing to me how much he's using Microsoft Excel and about how every month he has all of this reporting he has to do. And every month it's like they've never done it before, and so he's got all these folks on the staff that are pulling information together. There's a billion tabs. It's all crazy. And he's got to custom change everything and then get VLOOK. You guys, many of you watching this webinar know the VLOOKUP. You can now type VLOOKUPs without even having to look it up, so like, and I was talking to him and I was just like, hey, he knows my family, so he knows we're big Lego people. So I got my Legos here. We got a little blur going on, but this is contractor Casey and M engineer. And we were thinking, you can build masterpieces with Lego, which is the correct way to say it, Lego, not Legos. But you can build masterpieces with no limit to the imaginative capability. And they all click together perfectly. In fact, every Lego today that you use, you could pull one from the 1950s that was on the original manufacturer's run, and it would click together within 3/1000ths of an inch. because it is standardized, it's built to work together. And some of us think standards and discipline is boring, rigid, frustrating, and limiting. But think about what you can create with Legos. Limitless capabilities and possibilities of imagination. And when we were talking, we brought up the Lego analogy, and he's like, that's right. Like, I can't quickly build repeatably the information I need to go forward in business because we have to rebuild it every month. And so I just, it really resonated in that conversation. Both of us were kind of riffing on how much that standardization, repeatability, discipline, and maybe perhaps rigidity in some cases actually allowed for increased limitlessness in your capabilities. And so how could you incorporate that into a business setting? And that's a lot of what we do. So we may actually be kicking off a governance engagement with that particular customer. Um, whether that resonated with you guys or not, it certainly did with him. And so, yeah, wanted to share that here.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I've often compared the Jira issue types as Legos that you can put together, but I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah.
So it looks like you have some Legos need for Legos here.
Oh, no, no. Can we have two analogies in a row on governance? Well, this one's also a near and dear kind of family story for me because I was getting ready to go on a walk with my wife, and I have a young son who's still at home, and we had only a limited amount of time to go on a walk, and I couldn't get the things that I needed out of this crazy pile to go on the walk that we were going to go on or bike ride, and kind of actually ran out of time, and then had to get back to a work call and realized this is in a state of chaos and it's not good. It's limiting, and I use that word a lot because it's important. I've placed an artificial limit on my capabilities. Okay. And so as a business, are you placing an artificial limit on your capabilities by not managing your chaos properly? So go to the next slide. We got to fix that. We do have a white paper on the hidden cost of system chaos or data chaos. We're talking about more than data here, but maybe you also have system chaos where you have too many systems. It's too crazy. There's no, uniform code of how this stuff is supposed to fit together. And essentially, I won't get into too much detail here, but a lot of times as a company, what we do is we can help you kind of cover the pain of that. That's that initial ramp up middle curve there by applying things like custom solutions, widgets, add-ons, things like that to your data to help transform it properly to give you a boost. But that's not a long-term solution. And what we seek to do a lot with our customers, if they're interested in doing this, is put together a long-term solution so that they actually reduce data and system chaos, consolidate systems, consolidate data, bring in that representative uniformity to their business operations so that they can actually get back to the curve at the end, right way of doing business. And at some point, when those curves cross, your output takes care of itself and you get into a truly automated form of doing business where you have a high level of output with a low margin of cost and your net margins in your business go through the roof. And a lot of our customers have experienced net margin increases through this. Okay. Governance doesn't sound exciting. Nobody wants more government, but everybody wants more net margin, more profitability, more revenue, more customers, more throughput, more velocity, more flow. Okay. Well, that's how we do that. So, anyway, maybe next slide, we'll keep moving. A lot of times we underestimate the impact of poor data hygiene because they're diffuse and incremental costs. But it's not just the cost. If we go to the next slide, which we can improve cost, but it's actually, you can see here that fragmentation not only impacts internal efficiency, also erodes an enterprise's ability to adapt to market changes or capitalize on new opportunities that may be innovative related. Okay, so in this context, poor data hygiene isn't just an operational cost issue that we can actually probably knock off maybe up to 20% on cost, but what are you missing out on that you never even see? What I call shadow opportunities. You weren't able to take advantage of because your data, your system, your configuration were in a state of disarray. So
Or
that's actually,
your son.
yeah, exactly. So let's bring the story to conclusion. There's always got to be a happy ending, right? Yeah. I wanted to go on future walks with my son, and I hated that we missed an opportunity. That's a great point, Bonnie. I missed an opportunity. And so what did we do? I mean, you guys, some of this stuff isn't rocket science. So in the garage, we verticalized, see the bikes on the wall? We segregated, if you look at the bins versus the bikes versus the tools versus things on the floor, and we labeled. Now everybody knows where to get the rabbit food. Everybody knows where to get the winter clothes. Everybody knows where to get the bike helmets because it's labeled properly. I don't even need to tell them, okay? And so there are a lot of quick wins we can do with your teams out there that aren't 2-year projects. They're relatively quick wins. And I won't tell you how long it took me to do this in the garage. It wasn't as quick as I thought, but it was done in a weekend. I may have told my wife I'd be done in 3 hours. But anyway, within a weekend, we had it cleaned up. We're now going on walks pretty easily.
I always learn something new about you. Rabbit food, huh? Okay.
It's true.
So do any of these sound familiar to you? We have this page internal to our Valiantys called the Jira Hall of Fame, and this is where we will list out some of the things that we see in our clients' environments. And I imagine these numbers have changed since the last time I updated this slide, but if you have dozens of issue types, or hundreds or thousands of custom fields, or hundreds or thousands of different workflows and statuses and other schemes, if you have a dozen or more Jira admins, you likely need some governance over your tools. I love this image of this workflow. This is an actual workflow from a client system, and I've seen some crazy ones in my day as well. And this doesn't even show you all the craziness that can be underlying it with the conditions and validators and triggers and post functions. And so this this is a recipe for disaster in terms of quality and errors. You will have always lots of errors when things are when you're not using the shared schemes. Somebody makes a request for an update and it only happens in a certain spot, and they're expecting it to be everywhere else, and of course, that's not happening. So this is this is a call to action. You know, if look at your Jira configuration, Jira admins, and think about this: do you see things getting out of control? And if you do, this is an area where things are costing you and costing your organization a lot of money, not just in terms of the effort that it takes to maintain that system, but all of the lost opportunities and all of the errors and all of the end user impacts. The engineer is trying to work in the system, not knowing, am I supposed to use this or this or that? And that's time wasted. And so when you want to get your governance started, a lot of the common topics that you're going to look at first are, of course, you want to address that Wild Wild West configuration. That's the data topology of your system. And if you don't have a strong data topology, if you can't define this is what a Jira project represents, then that's got to be the first order of business. Permissions and security issues, those are certainly issues that we have to address in good governance. You know, Atlassian permission schemes and the project roles and the access groups all intersect in a matrixed way, especially with your permission schemes, but also in your workflow schemes or notifications. And all of that needs to be analyzed and understood well by your admins and by the people that manage your identity provider. And then we also want to look at end user support and end user confusion. We want to make sure that we're providing the right training model for our end users, training and enablement. And we also want to make sure we're providing the right support model for our end users. And so enablement and support are key aspects of a good, well-governed system. Some other things that we also look at is our admins. Have they been properly trained? Do they know all of the different ins and outs of their system? Because it's a big system and there's lots of different hooks here and there that can impact other things. And of course, that system cleanup. After you've got a good, clean, well-governed system, you've got a good foundation, and that's when you can really start looking at what do we need for our PMO, for our agile teams, for our hybrid scaled solution, or whatever different project management and portfolio management solutions you need. You can really make a powerful solution when you have a well-governed system. And so that's where you'll start moving into those discussions and start doing those trade studies to think about what is the right solution for us to address the needs that we have as an organization. So those are just some of the areas of concern, but they are definitely the most common as well. And so I promised you I'd talk about who's involved. Well, when you get started, that's one of the first things you need to do is you need to decide who's going to be on this governance board, and you're going to name it. And so the names will vary. I've heard them called all kinds of things: the Jira Advisory Board, the Atlassian Harmony Council, the ALM Change Control Board. It doesn't matter what you name it, but you're going to name it, and you're going to decide who should be involved. And that membership does need to include somebody who's a decision maker, the product owner. They're going to be the final point of decision. They're not going to make all the decisions by themselves. The entire governance board is involved in that decision making, and you're hoping that everybody can come to consensus. And ideally, that will happen most of the time, but there will be times when somebody as a product owner has to step in and make a final decision, especially when it comes to prioritizing the backlog of work that has to happen. And often you have to turn to experts to help you prioritize that, as this needs to happen first, then this, then this. Otherwise, you're doing things in a way that's going to cost you more in the long run. But there does need to be somebody that's that final decision maker. You want to make sure that you have all your admins on the team, on that governance board. And if you have a very large admin team, then maybe some of them are going to be representatives for the whole group, but they need to be represented because they're the ones that are going to talk about how much effort is involved, what the impacts are to the system, and they're going to know things that the general end user community won't necessarily know about. And then also, not just the Jira and Confluence or Atlassian tools administrators, but other tool administrators. Maybe you're going to have email or your development tools, your SAP or Microsoft products, SharePoint, all of those different IT representatives. They're not necessarily going to be on the change control board, the governance board 100% all the time, but you're going to need to call them in for certain topics. And so they are also going to be represented. And then the third bullet I listed there, this is probably the most critical. You want to have 6 to 10 engaged representatives from across the organization. Ideally, you want them to represent a full cross section of all of the different roles and responsibilities that are interacting with that system, not just the developers, not just the scrum masters, not just the product owners, but also the admin staff or the department management or project managers. So you're going to have different representation there. But I really want to stress that word engaged. You want to make sure that they are fully engaged and participating and learning about the system before voting or discussing and collaboratively coming to consensus on decisions. Often I recommend that it go on a rotating basis. Maybe after 6 months to a year, you rotate in other people as representatives, so that way it doesn't go stale. And so their activities, they're going to start out by defining what is our vision for our governance for our system. What are the goals that we're trying to set, and what are the practices we're going to follow? Set that standard for how we operate as a governance team. And that's going to be really important to define what is our scope of responsibility. And within that scope of responsibility, that would be all of the different tools that we're responsible for supporting and maintaining. And what support models do we have for those tools? And by support, I mean end user support, I mean end user enablement, I mean admin training, all of the different aspects of how this system needs to be supported. And then after you've got your governance board established, you're going to start identifying and documenting, implementing that system and Jira architecture. You want to know, what is our system actually supposed to look like? It may not be what it looks like now. It may just need minor changes. Maybe you're just documenting what's already in the system and then doing some cleanup, and that would be great. But maybe you're finding out that we've got Jira projects that represent initiatives, and Jira projects that represent teams, and Jira projects that represent products, and none of them operate in the same way. And so we've got to do some sort of unification. So you're going to have these different representatives design what exactly does the Jira project represent, and then start building out that solution, and then eventually move everybody into that represent that system appropriately. So after that's baselined, you won't need to meet as frequently. And so you're looking at maybe monthly, where you're going to be able to review what change requests come in. We need a new status. We need a new plugin for this kind of capability. We need a new custom field. You're also going to discuss maintenance activities. The admins will inform when we're going to be doing an upgrade. If you're on data center, you're probably planning to do enterprise releases. I think they're called long-term releases now. I'm old school. Enterprise release is what they used to be called. Or if it's cloud, you may want to be watching what's coming up, what's coming out of in the future, so that way you can prepare to enable those new users, or that new functionality, all your end users. So they'll just want to go to that monthly cadence at that point, but the upfront, you're going to look at meeting weekly at least to build out that baseline architectural design and decide what it looks like. One thing I like to point out is, when change requests come in, it is really important that the board members collaboratively consider all aspects of the change. I like to say there is no such thing as a free plugin. There really isn't. Even if it's free, it quite possibly is introducing configuration elements into your system. And then if you decide later that, oh, we don't want that plugin, you have to go in and you have to know what configuration elements it inserted. So you're going to have to go yank those out. So if you're going to try out a plugin, definitely try it out in the sandbox first. Don't put it in production first. So that way it's not so hard to clean up afterwards. But not just that, not just in terms of the impacts to your system, but also the end user enablement and the support. If you're introducing new functionality into the system, it's not free, because that means you have to support it as well. So make sure that you're keeping all of those aspects in mind. You also want to think about the aspects of how this integrates or impacts integrations with your system. If there's automations that have to be updated, or if you're adding a new custom field, how does that impact our workflows and the ways our teams are operating? How does it impact people's filters and dashboards and all of the different aspects of those types of end user functionality as well? So after they get together, like I said, they're going to want to define their vision and their goals. And so this slide actually is showing some governance goals and components. And you can see the goals are in the center. These are some example goals. Your goals might be something different. Maybe you're really worried about transparency, or maybe you're really worried about parenting information through the system. But some example goals might be that you want to have a system that can manage growth, that it's scalable, that you want to have visible control of the system, or that you want end user ownership over that system, and you want knowledge sharing. So those are some common and very important goals to keep in mind when you're establishing your governance. And then the components are all the different types of things that go into that governance. I mentioned before, what is the scope of our governance? And so you might include your Confluence and your Jira and your GitLab or Bitbucket repositories or Subversion, your portfolio solutions, and your Atlassian governance policies and how-to articles, all of the documentation that you can reference from Atlassian, as well as your internal knowledge bases. So your Atlassian best practices for your organization. And so after you've got established what your vision and your goals are for your governance board, then you get started. And I mentioned before, you're going to make those architectural decisions. Some of those will be your layers of scale. What is the hierarchy of our system? What is that? Of course, our scope of responsibility. And what does our JIRA configuration structure look like? What is our data topology? How do we lay out the issue types in our JIRA projects? This image here is just an example of some of the options that might be considered, but there are other options as well. You can see layers of scale here, that this one has 5 layers of scale, not including subtasks. And are we going to put all of those in a single JIRA project? And if we're not, how are we going to lay them out in the different projects, and what layers of those issue types of the hierarchy are going to reside in which types of projects? After you've got that defined, and you've defined also the workflows and the screens and fields associated with those, you'll start building out your program and portfolio requirements. And you'll do trade studies of the different solutions that are available. There's certainly a lot of different options when it comes to your project management and portfolio management type activities. And then you'll look at your team level customizations and those integrations. And you'll want to make sure that you're enabling teams to be able to be as independent as they would like within the structure of that governance system. And that's certainly feasible with the way Atlassian is setting up the automations and artificial intelligence. So anyways, that's where you would get started. In my governance space, I also have in our governance bootcamp, I also have an example backlog of the epics and stories of how you would break out the work so that you could get started that way. Oops, I'm going to go ahead and go. It's time for a demo now. So what I'd like to show you here, and Jason, I don't know if you've seen this before, but this is an example of our Atlassian governance board space that we sometimes will install into our client environments when we're working with them on our governance activities. And so one of the things I'll say before I even start talking about it is many companies do have this information captured somewhere. They might have some administration runbooks on admin Tom's hard drive, and also they have some in Jerry's Confluence personal space, and they might have a few items over here in SharePoint. They have all of these things all in different places, and that's not going to work, especially if it's on somebody's hard drive. Same with your knowledge base. Your end user knowledge base as well as your admin knowledge base. It might be scattered all over the place as well, or worse yet, not even created. So those are 2 aspects of this. So you'll see here I have this broken down into 3 things, and these don't have to necessarily live in the same Confluence space, and they don't have to live in Confluence at all, but this is just an example of what this can look like. So we have governance practices, and this is really the governing board where they're going to be making their decisions. They would have their decision log for all of the different activities, and they'd talk about their change request process and their support model and training model and their communication plans. Also, then we have our Atlassian administration section, and this is where they're going to have their naming conventions. They're going to have their runbooks for all of the most common things that they're doing frequently. And if you have a support team that's doing end user support, that might be a place where some of these runbooks might live as well. So that way they can manage those quickly. They're going to have their maintenance activities. If your team is going maintenance activities with a big question mark at the end, then you know you have governance issues, because there are certain maintenance activities they need to address. So they're going to have those broken out perhaps by quarterly or yearly type activities, and their sandbox updates and things like that. So if it's a DC environment, you'll certainly have your upgrade plans included as well. And then finally, we have our knowledge base. And the knowledge base here is where we document our JIRA configuration. And the JIRA configuration, when I say document our JIRA configuration, I don't mean that we're taking everything that's in our JIRA configuration and writing a document about it. This is just the information that's needed for that handoff from the JIRA admins who have full visibility of the system in the system of truth to the end users for the information that they need. As I mentioned, you're going to be defining what your different project categories are. And after you define them, you'll start breaking down the definition of what they are. So this example, an enterprise project category is the one that's defined for the portfolio and enterprise leadership. And it's where we track our themes and our portfolio initiative issue types. And products are defined through the use of this custom field or through components or whatever. And then we'll have just enough information for that handoff, which would be what is the issue type scheme for projects that are in this kind of category, and what is the workflow scheme, and what issue types are included in that. You might even have some information about the workflow details. If you have a certain quality approval role in that workflow, then you're going to want to make sure that's captured here so all of the people know that they have to have this role to transition from this status to that status, or any custom field details that you want to include as well. So just enough information to hand off between the admins and the groups. But also in your knowledge base, you're going to have links to all of your Atlassian documentation, all of the different things that Atlassian provides, or your Tempo, or your other vendors, Big Picture, or any of the other types of apps. Many of them are maintaining that documentation for you, especially as they are updating their products. You don't want that in your knowledge base. I've seen so many clients, they recreate all this great documentation and it looks really nice, but it is only a moment in time. And now they've got to maintain it. And when Atlassian changes something, you don't necessarily know that you have to go update that documentation. It goes stale very quickly. So instead, point to that Atlassian documentation for all of the different things that you want to provide to them. There's also YouTube channels that Atlassian and many of the plugin vendors provide. But you do want to document your Jira practices and your Confluence practices. Perhaps it's your sprint naming conventions and how those are being created in your organization. Or it might be how we set up our advanced roadmaps, plans in to show the different fields that we care about when we're in our project management meetings. Or it might be about some of the other types of how we configure our Kanban boards for and our Scrum boards when they're hooked up to Jira Line or whatever. And so also in Confluence, you might want to have some information about your labels taxonomy or which page templates we've created in our company specific templates. Maybe you're doing engineering estimates, or maybe you have certain client meeting templates that you would use. And so those would be documented there for everybody. Let me go back to the governance practices just for a moment. Along with all of these support models and training models, you also have your decision log. And this is where all of the different decisions are going to go when you're making decisions about your system. And so you might be talking about our Jira architecture. What are our different program and team categories? Or what are our workflow starting and ending practices? What is our hierarchy? How are our permission schemes set up? And all of these different types of conversations that are going to happen as you're building out what our system should look like. After a while, after you've built your baseline, then your decision log really becomes around the changes that are requested, new fields, new workflows. But these are all, this is just an example of how you could do this. You could certainly do it in Jira as well, or you can have it in Jira and Confluence combined, or SharePoint, or wherever you're going to document it. But the important thing is that you do document it and that you do make it transparent to the entire organization. Any questions, Jason, on that?
Well, I've got two kind of question thoughts, and this is kind of like real time on the fly, so hopefully it's okay. But I'm thinking about when you were showing the previous screen with the YouTube videos and all the content, I'm thinking about that Atlassian has now brought Loom into the fold of the portfolio. And so I also think about Southwest Airlines, who did what they call their TikTok of Southwest, where we helped them build out 140 short, like TikTok-ish videos that they embedded within their deployment all across their Atlassian platform to basically uphold what we're talking about here. So you could almost house all of those videos in Loom. Now, at the time, Atlassian didn't have Loom. Now they do. How awesome would that be to integrate that in? It's held within your governance knowledge base, but it's deployed out to each individual piece, part, and practice of your platform so that people can maintain discipline as they're using the tools. And so it's like, well, here's the Atlassian best practice, and here's how it applies to the process that we follow, and here's the guardrails, the healthy guardrails for this part of that process. And how cool would that be to integrate that in here?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Um, so that's part one. And then part two, now that Rovo is also a part of the portfolio, how cool would it be to somehow incorporate where all of this really healthy knowledge is there, but as this grows over time, and let's say a company, you first launch your governance initiative, and a month later, you don't have a lot of content in this knowledge base, but 2 years later, you're going to have so much content, it's hard for people to really sift through. Could Rovo help people to maintain excellence through this without having to sift through 1,000 documents and change, elements or something?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great point there.
I don't know.
Excellent.
Like I said, it's just real-time riffing here, but it could be a possibility to think about. Yep. Thanks for doing the demo. I think just one thing, two things about our company that make us stand out, and one thing is what Bonnie just showed you. Radical transparency, and that's not on this slide. But some companies will come in and they work through Microsoft Word, a PowerPoint deck, an Excel log that you're tracking in. And if we're working with you on your Atlassian deployment and we're talking about governance, we're going to be working inside of an environment that we're collaboratively working out of. So you just saw that. We call, some people call it like eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne, but that it's not just that we pat ourselves on the back and say, okay, we work out of an Atlassian environment. Ooh, we're great. It's about giving you the radical transparency of actually, whether it's an implementation, a full scale consulting effort, a governance engagement, we're working out of the same system, and it's the systems that we use, love, and like. So that fosters an environment of radical transparency. And we appreciate that. Our customers appreciate it. It's hard to believe that's unique, but we hear sometimes that it's a unique experience for them. It's refreshing. And so we want to keep that going. And you just saw an example of that, of what Bonnie just showed you. The second thing is that we're very value driven. We have a couple of interchangeable mantras here, but we use them interchangeably, but they're both valuable for different reasons. And one of them is we want to provide value at every interaction. This webinar, we hope, is valuable to you. It's an interaction with us. It's free for you. We hope that you've made it this far into it and you've found it valuable, so that we start off the relationship and continue it. Every interaction we have is valuable. And another term we use is we want every interaction to be remarkable. It's not just okay that you work with companies, that it's okay. Yeah, we got the job done. And sometimes the job doesn't just need to get done. But we do seek to make every interaction remarkable. We want to be remarkable people to work with. That's why I joined the company. It's fantastic people. There's a culture of kindness. There is a very high performance culture. And when you work with a team that's high performing, kind, humble, all of that, you get kind of it just naturally happens. You have remarkable interactions with people. And so we love that about this company. We hope that if you work with us or you're watching this, you've already worked with us, that you feel that way. Give us a shout out and a thumbs up that says, yes, they are. They're remarkable and valuable. So next slide. Um, this one, again, not to impress you, but just to impress upon you that we do work with companies, small business, medium enterprise, strategic size companies out there. So we have worked across multiple types of deployments. There's really not a job too small, but there's not a business that's too large that we could work with. Okay. Next is how do we do this? Again, you're experiencing the free webinar right now. We don't do the consultant thing where we just give you like a low cost engagement and then trick you and then shove $1 million SOW in front of your face. but there is a progression of value. And so we want to offer you, easy ways to begin getting value. And so the next step would be a governance workshop, which could just be it's a 1 day hands-on exercise where you're going to go into a lot more depth than we went into here. You're going to be even more well equipped. It's hands-on. It's extremely inexpensive. So it's an easy on-ramp for you to get started on that journey, and it's low commitment, right? You can get the value and take it, and we're happy that you got value. If you wish to at that point say, we want to actually do this, and we've tried it 3 times ourselves and it didn't really take, or whatever your situation is, maybe you just completed a migration and you realized, oh my gosh, we just consolidated all this stuff. It's an absolute trash heap. Um, whether you're getting ready to do a cloud transformation, sometimes at the beginning is the better time to do it than at the end. All right. If you want to do a real engagement, typically those take 2 to 4 months, and we can help work with you to establish everything Bonnie just talked about.
Yeah,
Um,
especially post migrations. I mean, post migration is the perfect time.
yeah,
Before migration is even better, actually, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah, don't let it go on. So you think, oh, I just smashed all this stuff together, we're done, lickety split. It's you could hypercharge the value of that migration and consolidation by applying governance. So next is just to reestablish. You guys are sitting on piles of data. I don't know if this is a tired message, but I think it's a true message, is that as we go into this age that we're in the data age. It's the new oil or gold. And so for you to be able to access and use your data appropriately to go compete, win, grow, and achieve your goals and objectives, you're going to need visibility, consistency, and to gather new insights. Your data is probably trying to tell you things that you don't know yet. And wouldn't it be cool to unlock that? And it's going to be almost impossible. It's kind of like, no, I'm not going to use the analogy. You can do something in one hand and wish in the other and see which one fills up first, right? Now, how many of us are doing that with our data? You just hope that you get better, and that hope is not a strategy. So if you want to unlock those insights, we really do have to do what Bonnie's been talking about here today. Next slide. Now we also recognize that, you know, to to do initiatives like these where it does cost money and there is an investment in people's time, you're already busy. There's only so much mind share and mental real estate amongst your teams. Are you going to be committed to do this? Well, we can walk with you through the business case for this. We've done this with enough companies that we're not talking about soft money here. We're not talking about just efficiencies. We're talking about real dollars. So some of that stuff in the future, unrealized opportunities, could even seem a little bit squishy. But if you just talk about the cost savings alone or the true margin benefits alone, those are hard dollars. You take those to your chief financial officer or your C-suite, your boards, and you say, we can save serious money here. You're going to have their attention, and these types of initiatives are a lot easier to start. So we don't just want to come in and say, rah, rah, we're cool, we're kind, we have a good culture. You want to work with us. We can actually work with you to develop those business cases. We have a lot of benchmark data for how much money our customers have really saved. And occasionally our customers are cool enough where we come back and we do a post hoc business case. So it's not just at the beginning of the project, this is how much we think you can save. We've gone back and actually talked about realized savings. And so those are hard benefits. And if you need that kind of help, just let us know and we can work with you to help get those business cases in place to perhaps help begin one of these initiatives. Next slide. That again, that maybe we don't belabor this, but everybody's on a journey of maturity, and I think this is really important. And wherever you are on it, we like to kind of find out what are those objectives, goals that you have as a company. Maybe you don't need to be level 5 transformational. I was working with a, chip manufacturer at one point that, they definitely needed to be in level 5. And, I've worked with governments that need to be in maybe level 3.5 or 4. And that's fine to be honest, but then you say, where are we now? And then what are the next steps we need to take? And you don't boil the ocean. You just get a plan, though. You got to have a plan. If you're going on vacation, you got to know where you're going and what route you're going to take to get there. And I think as a companies, we really like coming alongside and helping put that kind of vacation journey together to get where you want to go. And it's not that difficult. It's not like as scary as some people think it is. So we can work with you on that route as well. And that makes it seem a lot more consumable, a lot less threatening to the business, not as much rock the boat. Let's just keep providing value along the way. And if at some point, the way we typically do business with customers, if at some point you say, hey, we've achieved enough value right now, there's enough perceived or real value, we'll talk to you later, Valiantys. That's fine with us. We don't do anything to get quote unquote sticky. I hate that term. It's almost like you can't fire us. We're not like that. So we'll go along the journey as far as you want to go. And then, you let us go and call us back when you need more value later. So that's our method of doing business. And I think the next slide is probably the outro here. And it's just letting you know that we have a lot of training, events, webinars, classes that are coming up. Bonnie, maybe you'd like to kind of add to that.
Yeah, actually, well, I was just going to say what you just said about we'll let you go. I honestly, every single one of my engagements when I'm with them, my whole goal is to enable them to be able to do it themselves, because
Mhm.
at some point they've got to manage the system themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's my whole goal, is to put myself out of business. That's horrible, I know, but it's the truth.
Well,
'Cause
but people keep calling you back because they have another problem. Like, let's be real. We don't run out of problems out there. So,
but yeah, so anyways, yeah, we have a lot of webinars. We have Jira boot camps and Jira Line boot camps, Confluence uh, plans, all kinds of different training materials. And of course, we have our YouTube channel where we have all of the different webinars that we've done. So check it out. You'll find all kinds of great information there. If you're using Jira Line, you definitely want to check out the Jira Line channel, because Vicky does an awesome update every month or every release about what's coming now, because it's really hard to keep up with things. So, and yeah, we've been doing this webinar for a little while. This has been a fun one with the Lego analogies. So you can see all of our previous governance webinars there as well.
was that a hint that I need to bring Thumper to the next one since our
That'd
rabbit was
be
introduced?
great.
He's our neighborhood kind of pet, but yeah, we'll see.
Do we have any questions in the chat?
Good question. I don't see any in the chat that I'm looking at, but I don't know if Brianna has a separate chat. I don't think so. So maybe we wrap it up.
Well, a common question I often get is, what are the most common challenges we see? And I was thinking about that, where you were saying, if it didn't get traction that first time, that
Mhm.
and you've tried doing governance multiple times, and um, the the most common reasons I've seen are because the governance board either isn't fully cross-representative, doesn't have a good cross-section
Mhm.
of people. They don't have and so they have trouble getting traction. They have trouble getting moving on that, or they don't have the authority to make the decisions. And so, if without that authority, they struggle to get anything really truly accomplished. And so, they got to have representative governance, and they got to have the authority to make the decisions as a group.
That's a good point. And I was thinking about, if people have stuck with us this long in the webinar, what is another kind of, that's a valuable insight. What's another valuable insight? Kind of think about the garage analogy where we did a few things and it improved the garage. Do you think, one of the easiest things that they can do by themselves right now that they don't even need us for, that would improve things from a governance perspective?
Go into the Jira admin should go into their schema set and delete all the unused schemes. If nothing else, that's the easiest thing to do, and it's so it wastes so much time to have to scroll through so many different pages of configuration schemes.
Yeah.
But the one that'll bring the most high value to your end users, it sounds counterintuitive, but it would be convert all your team managed projects into company managed projects. Because if the team managed projects are all using a field called customer, and then when you go into your JQL search and you're searching for a customer, tilde for the text is Bravo, then it doesn't know which customer field to look at. You'll come up with, oh, there's 4 different customers in here, fields. Which one do I want? So they'll have to try each one until they get the one that through the
Yeah.
search that they saw. So it's so much wasted time. So
Yeah, that's a good for like an in-flight deployment. Those are good tips. One thing that I think you pointed out in the past, and maybe you pointed out earlier, and I just didn't pick up on this, but I want to point out again, is it's kind of surprising how many clients don't use templates. And if you start, how you start really dictates how you continue.
yeah, build out your project templates and your Confluence space templates. But yeah, if you have a Jira project that you just started out with, your first Jira project, and you like it, make it your template project, and then create all future projects with shared schemes with that template project. If you have 4 or 5 different project categories, you should have 4 or 5 project category 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 templates. So that way, every time you create a project of this category, it's with shared schemes of that one. So yeah, if you're starting a greenfield, define your templates. That's the best way, is to start the governance up front, because governance is really good governance over your tools. It's really like, arithmetic is to engineering. You can't do good engineering if you don't know 2 + 2 = 4. And you can't do calculus and differential equations until you've actually had that arithmetic basis, right? So the foundation is critical. If you don't have a good foundation, the house is going to fall over.
Yeah. And it's not one thing we say to like make anybody feel bad out there, because we also know that Jira being such a product-led, platform that, 20 years ago was something you swipe a credit card, you download 2 licenses, you share it with a buddy, and it just kind of grew a groundswell from the grassroots. Many
Grassroots.
people do have very, disparate deployments at this point in time. So we totally understand that. That's why we're offering webinars like this.
Acquisitions. Acquisitions are a great example where
Yeah.
you have multiple companies coming together. They might have actually had good definition of what a project meant in their company, but when they all were acquired and brought together, now they've got to marry those up. Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
On that note, and I'll just throw a teaser out there, because we do handle a lot of PMI. A lot of these companies, post-merger integration, consolidation is a quick win. And so efficiency gains are being tracked and you're looking for targets. Um, but, we also have an offering. And I know this is about governance, but we have an offering that is a PMI offering. If you have recently acquired a company or companies, or you're in the process of shopping and looking, or you're about to potentially roll into another company, let us know, because we actually do a lot of best practice around how that PMI process could look, and we can help you through that entire process. And governance is one part of that, but there's other parts, as you know. So we also have an offering for that. So if that's interesting to you, and again, you made it this far, then give us a call and let us know, and we'd be happy to show it to you, and you can kind of kick the tires and see what you think.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jason. I enjoyed having you today, and um, join us for the next governance webinar in March, or check out our YouTube channel and look for other webinars on many, 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 many topics.
Our next one will be our buddies at Tempo, who we
Yeah.
actually did a lot of this work with, right? So we're going to have some new faces on, and they're going to tell us their story. We're not going to put any words in their mouth. It's going to be raw and unvarnished. We'll have some interviewing, maybe a little fun, and you'll get to hear a real customer story, because we helped. We actually, even though we are partners in the ecosystem, they're an app partner, and we are a solution partner in the Atlassian ecosystem. We actually worked together to help do what Bonnie just said: bring 6 companies together into one company, supercharge their performance, and then they actually have a story where they're kind of dog fooded their solutions, and now they can go out to the market with a personal story, a lot more empathy, and hopefully a better solution. So they're going to be on. Hope you guys can join.
All right. Thank you very much.